Hello, my name is Mertad Hariri, CEO and President of Canadian Science Policy Centre. And once again, we are here in Ottawa, CSPC 2025, with yet another exciting interview. And I have the absolute pleasure and honor to sit beside Dr. Markus PRUTSCH, who is the head of Unit Policy Department for Transformation, Innovation and Health of the European Parliament. Dr. PRUTSCH, thank you for joining us, I guess, for the first time at
Indeed,
CSPC.
For the first time, and it's a great honor and privilege to be here. So thank you for having me.
The pleasure is ours. Thank you for being with us. Dr. PRUTSCH, just to begin with, if you could please describe your role as head of Unit Policy Department for Transformation, Innovation and Health. There are a lot of big words in one phrase. Yes, that's right. And how the unit shape the policies or help shape the policies in European Parliament.
Yes. So actually, my unit is a department consisting of three sectors that are covering, on the one hand, industry and research, including artificial intelligence. The second sector is environment, and the third, public health. And in these three sectors, our task is to provide evidence, science advice, but also very concrete drafting assistance for the members of the European Parliament to shaping the policies in these areas, all of which have become not just very prominent, but also very contested, not least given the shifting geopolitical context.
That's very interesting. So your unit operates as the advisory body to European Union members, the Parliament of European Union, and so that to shape the policies. And I just want to follow up on that how often is that the policies that you're recommending are being adopted or rejected or modified by the Parliament?
Yes. Well, strictly speaking, we are involved in every lawmaking process, in every legislative file. Another question is, of course, do they always follow our recommendations and suggestions? Obviously, not always. Right. But I would say in many cases, it's like very close to what we have prepared, what we have suggested, which is also due to the fact that our task is being a non-partisan body. And since we are also working on a daily basis with the policymakers, this is, of course, a huge asset in the sense of trust is an important element in science advice, as we all know. And by working with the policymakers on a daily basis, they perceive us to be part of the team, rather than something alien that comes in from time to time. And this is enormously helpful also for getting across messages, but also concrete recommendations on how to shape policies.
That's very interesting. And I want to, again, another follow-up question, because for our Canadian audience, this would be very interesting to know, since we don't have a science advisory kind of unit in our national parliament. People would be interested to know when this office was established and how many scientists working for that unit.
Yes. So actually the first Parliamentary Research Service was established some 20 years ago in the European Parliament. And this was out of the realization, in a way, of power politics, that's saying, okay, the executive has usually, they can rely on ministerial bureaucracies, they have the money, to buy in expertise. But as a parliament, you are somewhat, in a less favorable position. So 20 years ago, the first services were established and they increased over time. Now we have essentially two strands of advice services. The one is called indeed the European Parliamentary Research Service, which is mainly for individual requests of members, but also for foresight activities and providing normal library and information services. And then there are specialized departments like mine that are providing really policy advice for the committees and for the actual institutional work of the European Parliament. And in total, putting together these services, we have around 600 to 700 people working for us.
And how many of those are actual scientists? Right?
So I would say it's around half, because there are scientists, but there are also legal experts. And I should say that for the most part, our expertise is not internal. We are doing internal expertise as well, but we have expertise budgets because it would anyway be impossible to have such a number of scientists that you would be able to cover all aspects of legislative work. So I would say around 2/3 of our work is really externalizing expertise, so doing public procurement to get the best experts on the market to do research for very concrete questions. And we are then channeling it into the policy-making process.
That's a very interesting model. By the way, I think in Canada, we should start actually looking into different models, including the one in the European Union, to see how in Canada we can form that kind of a scientific advisory unit for House of Commons. Obviously, we have a chief science advisor in Canada. Dr. Mona Nemer is serving that. She's doing a fantastic job, but she is responsible to responding and advising mainly the executive branch, and that's the minister and the prime minister and cabinet. But whereas for Parliament, we don't have this specific scientific advisory body for House of Commons or the Senate. That could be an interesting model. I want to ask you about the considering geopolitical shift, as you mentioned. How do you envision the collaboration, scientific collaborations with at the international level, but specifically with Canada? What are the views in European Parliament and European scientific institutions in collaborations with Canada? We had the Horizon Europe, which is operational as of last year. There are a lot of excitement here in Canada, and we hope to expand those relationships. What are your views on that?
So obviously, I would say overall the relationships with Canada that had already traditionally been very good ones have further improved over the last few years. One should say and be honest, this was also due to the geopolitical landscape, in the sense of, when you are losing friends, you want to rely even more on the other friends that are remaining. Right. When it comes to cooperation, especially in the field of innovation, science, you already referred to one of the key instruments, because on the one hand, it's of course, science diplomacy, in the sense of also at high level that, trying to strengthen the bonds between the European Union and Canada. But there are also very concrete instruments like the Horizon Europe program, in which also Canada is a partner. I just had the opportunity like half an hour ago, here a scholar from Canada telling me that he just got the Horizon Europe grant, will go to Europe from March next year onwards. And this is a nice, it showcases that it's really working. It brings people across the Atlantic in both directions, and it's working. Besides that, of course, also the more general framework agreements on collaboration, also in trade and so on, had a positive effect on the field of science and science collaboration. But I would still say it's mainly the Horizon Europe program that serves as the basis for the institutionalized cooperation.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I want to go back to the science advisory role and the unit. How often you are collaborating or connecting with other advisory units across the globe, in Canada in particular, with any departmental advisors or others? Is this part of the mandate of your department to connect with others?
Yes, by all means. I mean, we have, of course, to distinguish collaboration directly during the process of providing science advice. It's rather either in identifying maybe experts, especially when in the European context you might not have the right experts, then it's of course also reaching out to other services, but especially also at the level of administrative collaboration and staff development. This is very important for us. Exchange of good practices with other research services that are doing the same thing, are facing the same problems and challenges that we are facing. So in that sense, there is a strong collaboration, and this is also part of our mandate in the sense of to develop new forms of science advice, to identify challenges and how to address them, but also see, across the border, just to see also how do others do it and what might they do better than we do and what could we learn from them and they from us.
That's fascinating. And that brings me to the question about your board membership of INCSA, International Network of Science Advisors. And if you could please tell us a little bit about that and your contribution to INCSA to this amazing network of science advisors across the globe.
Indeed. I mean, INGSA is a fascinating network, a growing network. I have been working at this intersection between science and policy making for almost 15 years now. And I also grew more and more into this role of trying to see also what can we do beyond the actual science advice in an institutional context, in my case, the European Union, how to improve at the more horizontal level, around the globe, institutional science advice. And my role in the INGSA board is particularly also to see how early and mid-career researchers can become part of science advice. And this is in a double sense of the meaning. On the one hand, it's obviously because we are missing a huge potential if we are not also trying to bring on board early and mid-career researchers. I mean, to mention an obvious example, in many emerging technologies, it's often very relatively young scholars that are at the forefront of research. So by saying we are only taking, professors that have already 35 years of experience in their job, would cut us off, from really a very important resource. At the same time, it's also about forming the next generation of then senior policy advisors, meaning how do we make early and mid-career researchers getting interested also in science advice? And as you're also very well aware, this is not so obvious because within an academic career, while it's important that you publish in the right places and the right stuff, it's much less important whether you do science advice or not. It doesn't really help you in your career. At the same time, there is still this perception of, I don't really know what policy making is, so why should I engage in something that I'm not familiar with? So the second leg is in really capacity building, communicating also what science advice is and making more early and mid-career researchers getting interested in these activities. And that's my main role within the INGSA board.
That's a fascinating role. INGSA itself is a fascinating organization. I'm one of the fans of INGSA. Anyway, kudos to you and your colleagues. This is your first time that you're attending CSPC conference, and I want to ask for your views and your experience at the conference. How did you find it?
So, I'm very honest and blunt, but in a positive sense of the meaning. When I came here, I was not really sure what I would have to expect. I mean, I found it already very interesting that a conference that has such a specific focus brings together so many scholars. But that in itself is, of course, you can say, sheer numbers don't matter. But having been here now, it really gives me the impression you have come up with something extraordinary. Bringing together a bunch of people that are really interested in this subject, that are really curious about learning from others and exchanging in such a dynamic environment. So I would definitely say I will get home with a lot of experiences, but also an extremely positive impression from this conference and your activities.
Thank you so very much for that comment. I appreciate that, and I'm so glad that you have very positive experience here, and looking forward to have you next year, and possibly more delegations from European Union advisory bodies and the Parliament attending CSPC.
It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you so very much, Dr. PRUTSCH. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.